My name is Jacqueline Williams. I am a survivor of childhood domestic violence and sexual assault. My story starts in Amityville, Long Island. I don't have clear memories, but my therapist has helped me understand that the molestation started when I was around 5 years old. I had a recurring dream where my mother's boyfriend was very tall and I was very small. And my therapist interpreted to help me understand that I must have been about 5. What my mother often did was try to get away. And I think just because she was tired, like a lot of parents are, but she wasn't cautious at all about who she left me with. And so she would leave me with him. And he would touch my private areas. He would try to put his penis in my mouth. And as small as I was, everything in my little body was like, that's not a good idea. And so I would kind of close my mouth tightly, which would then cause him to hit me. And this went on for many years. When I was 7 years old, we moved into a new house in a community that I was very familiar with. My grandmother lived in the community. And the violence between my mother and her boyfriend got much worse. So I don't know if it was the pressure of a mortgage, or I don't know if the drinking progressed. It seemed like more drinking and more parties and less paying attention to my sister and I. A lot of times I got caught up in the violence because, like any small child, if you see your mother being hurt, you run to your mother. That's natural. I was a teeny little kid. He would throw me, and I would fly across the room and bang into a wall. And he would punch me in my stomach. He would kick me in the back. He was a very violent man, and he wasn't just violent with our family. He was violent in the community. Many people were afraid of him. He cut people. He shot at people. My mother was a small woman also, and he was a big guy, and he would hit her with his fists, and she would hit the floor from a standing up position. I learned quickly to run and hide as opposed to try to help. So by the time I'm 7 or 8 years old, when they start to fight, I run and hide in the doghouse outside. And at one point, her boyfriend dragged me by my hair back into the house and yelled at me, "What happens in this house stays in this house." And so it was horror all the time. When my sister and I decided to write this book together, we decided that we would start the book by saying the real Amityville horror lived at our house. My sister was 9 years older than me. She's a pretty girl. She had a nice figure. And he tried to rape her, I don't know how many times. At one point, she stabbed him with scissors. Another time, she jumped from a moving car, ripped up her stockings, scraped up her legs and her face. We were all at my grandmother's house, and I think I was about 8 years old then. And my sister comes in bleeding. Clearly she'd been in some kind of accident. And when she explained that she had to jump from the moving car because he had grabbed her dress and was attempting to rip it off, my mother just sat there. She had no comment until finally she said, "That's not true." She called my sister a liar. And I think subconsciously that taught me, don't even bother to tell her, because I didn't know what rape meant, but I knew something bad happened to my sister. I could look at her and tell. She looked like she had been in a car accident. They all took my mother, because some of my aunts and uncles were there, and they took my mother in a room, and you could hear a lot of yelling, couldn't really distinguish. But she just wouldn't believe that's what was happening. So by the time I'm 10 years old, she catches him with my pants down and his penis between my legs masturbating. She starts to yell and scream, and she has her menstrual cycle. How could you do something like this? He threatens to kill her and walks out, gets in his car, drives away. The first thing my mother said to me was, "Jackie, Mommy doesn't like the things you do." Not, "I'm sorry for what he did to you. I will pay more careful attention. I'll try to get us away." So that's when the shame and the blame began for me. And shortly after that, on Long Island, people have septic tanks. And so he dug a 6-foot grave in our backyard, and he told all our neighbors that he was going to put in a second septic tank. But he told me that if I ever told anyone that he was touching me, And if I didn't do exactly what he told me to do, he would kill my mother. And he said, I will just tell people that she left us. And because she left me with him all the time, I believed him. I didn't tell. I developed a coping mechanism where I would wrap myself into a ball and I would get on the floor and make myself as small as I could, and he would hit me and kick me, and I just would cry as quietly as I could. But I knew something was wrong with this. Wasn't a game, but I had no idea how sick it was. So by the time I'm in middle school, I take biology and start to understand my own body. And people came into our school to talk to us about, what we nowadays call good touch and bad touch. But I was terrified. I wouldn't tell. I never told. I never said one word. In fact, one evening, I was about 13, and he pulled over to the side of the road to look for, he dropped a condom, and it must have gone under the car seat. And he kept asking me if I saw it, and I didn't even know what he was looking for. I was just terrified because I was far away from home, not too far to run, but I never had the courage to run. I always wanted to run, but I was just too terrified. And so a police officer pulls up behind us, and he comes over and he asks for license and registration. He asked him what was wrong, and he said that he dropped some money and he was trying to find it. And I must have looked terrified because the police officer said to me, "Are you okay?" And I just nodded my head yes. I wouldn't even dare speak. I thought my voice would give me away. And he said, "How do you know this man?" And he said to him, "Well, you ask her something like that's my daughter." And so he said, "Is this your father?" And I just nodded my head yes. And the police officer said, "Well, why don't you find it when you get home? Because you don't have on any flashers and you could cause an accident pulled over without them on." And he says, "Oh, well, you're right, officer. I'll find it when I get home." But he didn't take me home. He took me to an abandoned area behind the convent in Amityville where he attempted to, I guess that night he had decided that he was actually going to go through with rape. He was drinking, and he kept saying to me that we're going to have intercourse and you're going to have a baby. And I thought he was saying intercourse. So when I was 13, kids didn't necessarily know the correct words for sexual contact. In fact, we didn't know a lot about sex at all. So I tried to placate him by asking him, "What does that mean?" And he slapped me so hard my head hit the window, and I reached up to see if I was bleeding, but I wasn't, but it was that hard. So I decided then, don't say another word. Again, I went into that. It's even more pronounced than a fetal position. In the back seat of the car, on the floor, protecting my head, waiting for the blows. And I think he just got discouraged, and he said to me, "All I'm going to say to you, little girl, is if you tell anybody, I'll kill her tonight. I will bury her tonight. And like I said, I'll tell everybody that she left us. And they'll believe me. They won't believe you." I wasn't about to tell anybody. I just wasn't. Shortly after that, we had a big snowstorm. And he was particularly violent that day. My mother had gone out with her friends, and I begged to go. I would plead with her to take me, but she didn't. None of her friends were taking their kids, so she didn't want to take me. And he picked me up by my throat, and there was something different that time. There was a look in his eye that I think that day he planned to kill me. And because he had never gotten to the point that he wanted to get to, I think he felt I should die. And he took me into their bedroom. He took my pants down, and someone began to bang violently on our front door. He did like this to me, like, "Don't say a word." But the person wouldn't go away. They kept banging and kept banging. And so he finally pulled his pants up and went to the front door. And it was one of his friends who he and his wife were having problems in their marriage. And my mother had counseled him and his wife and just tried to encourage them because they had a small child, had a little boy. And he stopped the friend from coming in the house, but he decided to talk to the friend. And it was that day that I found my courage. I pulled my pants up, and I ran through the house out the back door. It was 4 degrees outside. All of my friends were outside playing in the snow. I ran outside with no coat, no hat, no shoes, one sock. I ran to my grandmother's house. A family friend who we called Uncle. He was not a real uncle, but he was an uncle. He was a police officer, and he was visiting my grandmother. And I had blood on my shirt from where him carrying me had ripped the inside of my jaw. And my grandmother almost fainted. She said to me, "My God, Jackie, who did this to you?" And I said his name. That was the day that I found my courage. I ran through the back of the house and out the back door. I had no hat, no coat, one sock, and no shoes. But I ran like my life depended on it, because that day I believed he was going to kill me. When I got to my grandmother's house, I was bleeding from the mouth. I had blood on my t-shirt and clearly was not dressed for the weather. And my grandmother almost fainted. She said to me, "Oh my God, Jackie, who did this to you?" I said, "Howard did." My uncle stood up and he told my mother, "You and Mama take her in the back and find out what he did to her. And then I'm going to ask her what he did to her. And then you are going to do exactly what I tell you to do, Hazel." He said, "Do you understand me?" He said, "Because you're going to report this, because if you don't, I will." And so, they took me in one of the bedrooms, and I told my mother that he had been touching me and trying to put his penis in my mouth, and that he choked me, and he would hit me and kick me. And I told her about the place by the convent. My grandmother couldn't even speak. Now, the irony of this is my grandmother's boyfriend went and got his gun, but he was molesting me too, and he had been all along. He was also one of those men who would put his penis between my legs and masturbate. And I think I fainted. And, they gave me some water. They put some ice on the back of my neck. And Uncle asked me what happened, and I told him. And he said to my mother, "You have 1 day to report it. 1 day, today." He said, "If you don't, I will." He said to her, "I don't care what you got going on with him. I don't care how you feel about him. She's a child. And if you won't protect her, I will." So my mother took me to the precinct, and the police officer asked me if I had intercourse. Well, I didn't really know what intercourse was, so I said yes, because I thought that was intercourse, all of that crazy stuff that he did, that wicked behavior, I didn't know. The police officer instructed my mother to take me to a doctor, because he said, "You have to prove that she's no longer a virgin and that she's been raped." My mom takes me to a doctor and a GYN, and doctor says her hymen's intact. My mother was so relieved that she then dropped the charges, and nobody believed me. Even beat up the way I was, nobody believed me. I became the child who lied about sexual contact, when kids then didn't even know about sexual contact. That was how my family dealt with this. And it wasn't until many, many years later, I was an adult in my 30s, and one of my cousins said to me, "I always wanted to ask you, did Howard actually rape you?" And I said, "No." And she said to me, "How did he get away with it, though? How did he get away with touching you?" So I explained to her that I didn't know what intercourse was. And so when they asked me if I had intercourse, I said yes. When Mom took me to the doctor said, "No, she's a virgin. Her hymen's intact." And Mom chose, even though she knew he was molesting me because she caught him 3 years earlier, she chose to just squash it. And so she stayed with him for many, many years. I began at age 14 to mark days off the calendar. For 4 years, I crossed days off my calendar. I decided that college was my way out, and I didn't care what college I got accepted to. I was going, and I was never going to look back. I was so confused by my mother's actions that for a time, I could hardly talk to her. And she and I had always been very close. Those last 4 years were very, very tense. He never touched me again, but I didn't know it was over. So every time he would get up at night to go to the bathroom, I was terrified, just absolutely terrified. I was not allowed to have a lock on my door, because he told my mother, "You don't know what she could be doing in there if you let her put a lock on the inside of the door." And I guess she was scared of him. He was certainly evil enough, And he beat her really bad. He did some horrible, horrible things to my mother. One time he tied her to a chair and beat her with a 2x4 and just did some really bad things to her. One of her old boyfriends came to visit, and he was insanely jealous. And so when the old boyfriend left, he just hit her. And he hit her so hard, again, that she hit the floor. And then he grabbed her, put her in a chair, and began to tie her into the chair. And I'm screaming hysterically now because I'm about 9 years old now. And I've seen him do some crazy things, but I didn't know what to do. And so when he started to hit her with this piece of wood that I learned later is called a 2x4, I ran and hid in a vent in my closet. The vent was too small for him to get into because he had tried to get me out of there before. But when I was 7 years old, he created a whole lie about my father. He said that my father had come to Amityville and that my mother had met him and was at the bar laughing and joking with him. And he was indicating that my father was saying that he always loved the way she walked. And my mother was trying to ignore him, I think. And so she turned her back. She was laying on the couch and he grabbed her, picked her up, raised her above his head and slammed her to the floor. He broke her hip. And for as long as I live, I will never forget the sound that my mother made. It was almost like a wounded animal. It was a horrible sound. And she just lay there still. He kicked her. She still didn't move. And then he told her to get up and clean yourself up. And she said, I can't stand. Now I can hear them because I'm hiding in the heat vent. So I can hear. Because at the point that he slammed her to the floor, I took off again into the vent. And I crawl out of the vent and I peek around the corner from the dining room, and he picked her up and he put her in the bed. And then he called the police saying that she had fallen on the back steps and he thought her leg was broken and he needed to take her to the hospital. And that was the story that she stuck with. She told everybody that. And when she came home from the hospital, she was on crutches. She had broken hip, pretty badly bruised. And my family came out from Brooklyn. And my great aunt said to him, you are a menace to society. She was so angry that I thought for years menace to society was one word. She said, you belong in an asylum for the criminally insane. She said, you did this to my niece, and I know you did it to her. I can't prove it, but I know you did it. She said, so I'm going to give you a chance. She said, why don't you hit me? I was terrified. I ran and hid behind one of my uncles. But my uncles pushed me behind an older cousin, and they went and stood at my aunt's left and her right. And he did not move. He said, Miss Mary, I don't want no trouble with you. And so she said, I will kill you right here, right now. If you step towards me, I will put a bullet between your eyes and I will wait for the police. That was the first time I heard a strong woman. I always loved her. She was always a pistol, you know, and so much fun. But that day, boy, she was angry. And given his criminal record, he was wanted for murder at the time in Baltimore. And given his criminal record, she might have gotten away with it in self-defense. I tried every day to act like a normal kid. I joined the track team. I joined the chorus. I joined the drama club. I tried every way I knew how to act like a normal kid. I had good friends, close friends. Many of us are still friends to this day. But I didn't dare tell because I knew how he beat her and I knew he would kill her because every time he beat her, it seemed like he was trying to kill her. It seemed like he hated her and she would cater to him. She bought him suits. She cooked food. She made me clean the house, and people used to always come and say, oh, Hazel, your house is so beautiful. And she would just say, thank you. You know, she never said Jackie is a good helper. But it was a very lonely existence. And I also was very sad, but I learned how to hide it. I learned how to wear a mask. My sister and I both, we learned how to wear a mask, because I didn't think other people's lives were different until I started to kind of hang out with some of my close girlfriends. And I got to know their mom and dad, and I saw that their lives were very different from mine. So because I now know this is not the norm, I'm even more ashamed. And so I just pretended to be someone else. I had good friends, and their parents knew something was wrong because the police typically were at our house every weekend. A lot of their parents would invite me to come to cookouts and go shopping. And if the family went to a movie, I was almost always invited because they knew I had a rough home life, but no one had a clue what it was really like. It was sad, lonely. I don't even know words to describe the fear that I lived with. I was always on alert, always afraid. And I believed, he left that 6-foot hole in our backyard for years. Even after the molestation stopped, the domestic violence did not stop. Sometimes I wouldn't go to my closest friend's house. I would go to somebody's house that I just kind of knew from school. And that way he couldn't find me. I left when I was 18. So I decided that I was going to get a job, and I was going to move to Paris, and I was going to wear a beret and eat bread. That's how innocent I was, even at 18. So I took a job in a factory, and it became clear to me that you can't make enough money to get to Paris. So I followed my best friend to college. She had already started, and I applied, and I got accepted, and I moved on campus, and I was kind of free, but not in my mind. By then was so damaged, so traumatized that I began to drink. But I made lifelong friends in school, along with my best friend, who, we became friends when we were 12. And she didn't drink, she didn't smoke. She was just kind of quiet, and I always tell people that I was the kind of outgoing, boisterous, loud, crazy, funny person. I am 70 years old, though I like to say in my mind, I'm only 40. I have a young spirit. I always have. I went on to a 4-year school. I got my bachelor's. I got my master's. I was halfway through my doctorate, and my youngest niece, my sister's youngest daughter, had a crisis, and I decided to adopt her 2 youngest children. And when I adopted them, the youngest was 11 months old. The oldest had just turned 3, and now they are 18 and 20. My sister passed away from ovarian cancer, and my brother-in-law from heart disease. And so I explained that they don't have grandparents on my side of the family, but they have a great aunt who has the means to take care of the children. I am an education administrator. I work for a major pediatric rehabilitation hospital, and I am assigned to a legal team that's sues school districts. So I have a regular job. I don't work weekends. I don't work nights. So as the girls get older and they have activities, I'll be right there. We are happy. We are healthy. I spent 8 years in therapy. I was addicted to for 16 years. I have been clean and sober for 31 years. I always say to people, if you need proof that you can thrive after a childhood trauma, because there's more than survival, you can thrive. Use my life as your baseline. I wrote By His Grace, which kind of chronicles some of the horrible memories that I shared with you. But I'm going to write a sequel too, Grace Upon Grace, which is going to talk about the days when I brought those 2 little babies home. And they were so happy that they didn't know what to play with first. And so you can make it. You can make it. Many adults still carry the shame of a childhood trauma, but it is not your shame to carry. It is the person who assaulted you that should carry that shame. Childhood trauma is never the child's fault.